loading the whole thing. And the timer is set. Team Functionland, please take it away.
So at Functionland, we are on a mission to bring a piece of blockchain on every desk. Many of us remember floppy disks in early days and how people switched to DVDs because they were faster, safer, and bigger. And now all of our stuff are in the cloud storages, which are provided by big tech because it made sharing and collaboration easier. In this transition, however, we lost the ownership of data, and now they take our data and monetize them and launch services for the things that matter most to us, like pictures and memories, and use that to impose the parable of boiling frog problem on us. For example, Google Photos was initially marketed as a free forever application, and after they trained their AI over millions of personal images, they pulled the plug and removed the free tier earlier this year, which will force all Google Cloud users to pay at some point in the near future. We are living in a rental internet era, where we are forced to store our data on islands of storage. And it's inefficient because each company attaches their service to their own storage, to own users' data, and have the power to push us to pay with either cash, attention, or privacy. And it's not limited to just Google. An average consumer spends more than $200 per year only on cloud storage subscription, let alone the application fees. And it doesn't stop with money. They are exposed to many ads per day, but people are increasingly becoming aware of the problem. And many US consumers say the potential risks they face from data collection by companies outweigh the benefits. And they are looking for solutions such as network attached storage, but these are limited by setup technicality, application support, and expandability. There are more than 2 billion users who log into cloud services on a daily basis. From them, about half regularly optimize their spendings on these services, and we can address this market from the path of least resistance, which are early adopters who are ready to try new technologies and still give us a $3 billion readily available market. And blockchain is here to solve this problem. We want to make it accessible for everyone by being a pioneer in introducing the blockchain attached storage to transform the cloud in a three-pillar solution. Blockchain superpowers can only be realized when it's truly decentralized and not 50% on central servers like AWS. So we want to split up those large data centers by introducing a new ecosystem where everyone can purchase a plug and play decentralized app server called Box and has access to a pool of open source, free and high quality applications. Box includes up to 9 towers, which are customizable. And by using Raspberry Pi, we are minimizing the risks of hardware production and also building a market for Raspberry Pi enthusiasts to jump on and start building innovative towers. After gaining the user base, we will have a specific PCB designed through partnerships with hardware manufacturers. Box is powered by our software layer named Borg protocol, which facilitates P2P services over Web3. So instead of paying Google, I can create a local pool with Kate and 10 other people. And within that shard, we can back up each other's data and share our CPUs in the cluster to train our AI, for example. This comes at zero cost and without increased latency and slowness due to fetching data from distant regions. To provide a pool of open source and high quality applications, we need to onboard developers. And we need to address the main barriers of entry for them. Through Borg, we are incentivizing developers to build open source apps. Users pay all contributors of the application with Borg tokens when they use the app. And the best part is they are not paying out of pocket. They'll pay with Borg tokens, which are auto-minted and kept at their boxes. Borg also provides an abstraction layer for Web3, which enables front-end developers to build on Borg with their current skill set, which makes us a participating developer in the app and actually becomes a recurring source of revenue for us. We want to become the platform that empowers the developers whose like innovations is limited by the companies they work for, but doesn't have an alternative financially, to become self-employed and work on any open source app that they liked. To showcase our solution with a real example, we designed Photos application, which is an alternative to Google Photos. You can see the proof of concept here, and we implemented all features of Google Photos that users loved for years, as well as a one-click import feature that enables users to import their media files from Google with a single click of a button. And we saw substantial initial traction in the developers world. Our GitHub is now in the top 3% of open source applications worldwide with more than 500 stars. More than 35 developers has forked our code and are exploring it. And we won the first place in Filecoin Hackathon. We are also validated and backed by big names such as Protocol Labs, Filecoin, Dfinity, Crust, as well as Outlier Ventures. The progress so far is made possible with the team of Functionland, which has a proven track record in a diverse skill set, ranging from AI, commercialization, user experience, hardware, marketing, finance, and branding. And we have experienced advisors such as Chris Gale, who is the founder of ViewWorks, and Zach Cohen, who is the founder of Firebase. We studied similar recent projects such as Helium, and we planned for our first year sales to reach the goal of 80K. If we apply the 50% growth rate, we will reach more than 1 million users in 5 years. You can see the hockey stick in our software revenue as the ecosystem adoption materializes, which helps us pass 360 million revenue in 2026. Looking at the competitive landscape, we are actually in a sweet spot because we are introducing a new category and none of the competitors are addressing both data ownership problem from the end user's perspective and open source monetization from developers' perspective, which makes the competitors more like our partners, and we already have open channel of communications with some of them. Regarding our milestones, we have already completed our proof of concept application, and we are looking to have a private token sale with a goal of 1 million in November. Then we finalize and package our protocol and start community building by reaching out to the Raspberry Pi community who already have the hardware at hand and can simply just install our software and become the first users of our network. After gaining the user base there, we launch our Kickstarter campaign, for which we are working with Gadgetflow. And then we have our token sale and token generation event early next year. In Q4 next year, users will receive the first batch of blockchain patch storage. Thank you. I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you, Team Functionland. I invite questions from the floor.
I have a quick question, guys. Who in the team has experience in bringing consumer products, ideally hardware, to market?
So we have Ehsan Imami, who's an ex-Apple and GoPro employee. He's been like serving in the front line of delivering consumer products to the masses.
Yeah, I mean, I think the product needs to be really sexy, right? I mean, it's not just what it enables, but I think you would want this as pride of place in the house as an object, not just the digital software component, right? So I think the product design has to be on point.
Yeah, definitely. So that's why we design it to look exotic, and so people buy from emotion and be attached to it emotionally as well as blockchain wise.
And hey, it's Rumi. Can you talk further about how your product looks exotic? Or if you want to walk through that or share what you think about it pulls people to want to have it as an exotic piece.
Sure. I mean, the looks of it, the way the towers, people have described it as like small models of skyscrapers, and also the utility of it. So one aspect that we are approaching like existing hardware users from is it's a docking station as well. So it is a docking station that's also a blockchain attached storage. So it has utility scenarios beyond what we have, and appeals to a already existing market. And we took that page from the book of Helium, that this is just a router. So ours is like a docking station that adds all these cool capabilities to your desk.
That's helpful. Also, kind of just nudging you a little bit more in where Jamie was also talking about around getting people to and put another way, effective marketing, right? Can you walk through a little bit more in detail your go-to market plans? Like, how do you think you're going to be reaching customers and getting them from interest to actually purchase and utilization, and not just the box, but the protocol and everything? Like, how is this working in your head of what the customer journey looks like?
Sure. Kate, would you like to speak to that?
Sure. Well, I'll mention on the hardware side, certainly our hardware campaign and Kickstarter campaign, although it's projected to start in February, there's a lot of the legwork going in advance of that. So seeing who our audiences are and testing out landing pages. And we have a variety of audiences, and we have to embrace that. So we do have our developer audience and then that consumer and audience at the end. And then in terms of that Raspberry Pi audience, they do a foundation now that is trying to really actively do outreach in South America or Africa and reactivate some of these projects. So even in British schools, have these little micro factories or maker spaces that can start to put their projects together and then start to help us spread the word even in advance of the box coming. But I'll let Kayvon round that answer out if he has anything to add.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, as Kate rounded up perfectly, but I mean, yeah, we have these two fronts of the battle that we need to fight at the same time. And one is to get hardware people on board with the idea. And the cool thing is that the Raspberry Pi ecosystem is really open-minded and really eager into jumping into Web3 ecosystem. So they are actively looking for Web3 solutions on their own end. And they are the most active NAS community in the world because they invented open source hardware essentially. So we start with them and continue with Kickstarter, and that generates the buzz that we need.
And just to add, for developers specifically, we are thinking of having grants and like bounties to onboard them after Borg protocol is launched.
Yeah, that's basically how we quit our own full-time jobs and entered this journey.
Right. Thanks. But because I'm familiar, and I'm so sorry about that, but that piece of the pie, or that component that you have, I think it was like 3.2 billion. That's the addressable market that you have. How much of that, what percentage of that is current Raspberry Pi enthusiasts and users, do you think?
So we're thinking that it would be around like 8,000 K by the end of this year. So the initial, so we are targeting the Raspberry Pi owners who are also NAS operators at the moment. And that's a small chunk of Raspberry Pi owners. But it will give us like an 8,000 user base by the end of the year. That's 8,000 validators by the end of this year.
Right. So, but what would that translate into revenue as a percentage of the 3 billion addressable market that you're seeking?
Right. So that total addressable market is like a breakdown of the whole market, right? So we have this knife that cuts the cake, right? We have users who log into services every day. Then there are people who actively change their subscription. They are mindful of how much they're spending, right? And that's the target group for us. So
right. And I guess what I'm saying is, of that target group, how many of them are Raspberry Pi people? Like, is that another slice that has to come down, and by how much?
Right, sure. I mean, totally there are like 40 million Raspberry Pis in circulation today. So it's going to be like a small chunk altogether. But the purpose of existence of the Raspberry Pi community is the establishment, as opposed to a plan of going mainstream, because these people are already on board with the idea of self-hosting. There's like a subreddit called self-hosters, and they are already on that mindset. So it's just that, oh, these people who have been doing it for 10 years, they're now jumping to Web3 with Borg.
Jump in there, Kate. Kate, were you trying to add something?
So no, sorry, I think the Raspberry Pi community is very important to us, but it's more of a beachhead market as we go. So we've got the the storage conscious, the privacy minded, the crypto enthusiasts, so the Web3 curious. And the Raspberry Pi is going to help us get there while we're waiting for the hardware to come. And then over time, it'll become maybe a smaller proportion as the market's more made up of our average consumers.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I just want to ask one kind of a question that builds on that, and I'll get out of the way. But because I think this is the important stuff, right? Is maybe I have a uneducated understanding of the Raspberry Pi community, quite possible, but I imagine they're quite technical hobbyists, very different to somebody that buys an Apple product because it's really sexy, right? Or a crypto degen that will see this as a freedom tower, right? So I'm just trying to understand how you as a team go beyond that beachhead of Raspberry Pi holders to a mainstream product, if that's even the aspiration. Maybe it's not.
Yeah, that's definitely the aspiration. And the way we go about it is we are packaging all that technical stuff and that this plug and play package that you just plug to the wall and it works. So the hardness of like getting a box to work is on par with getting a Chromecast to work. So that's the first element, having a perfect user experience. The second element for bridging that gap between and starting with Raspberry Pi owners is that, as you said, they've been for 10 years like, oh, I'm this degenerate who hosts her or his own files, right? Now look at what I found on the net. This is like a plug and play thing that you can buy from Tesco and do these things that I've been doing for over 10 years. So we want to have that network effect by starting with that niche that is like a long-time veteran of the space.
Understood. And what's the price point? And have you thought through any of the buy to lease, or what's the other way around? Like you kind of lease the product and they pay it off over time with their earnings. Have you kind of thought through any of that side?
Sure. Aslan, do you want to?
Yeah, so we have two actual tiers. One is Box Lite, which is just one tower, and the user has to plug in their SSD or HDD to it to get it working. So for those users who want to pay less than 100, it's just 99, and who has an old hardware at home who can plug it in and start using it, that's an ideal option. We also have a $400 full box, which comes with one CPU tower and one storage tower, and that actually gives them the possibility to later on purchase more towers and use the box for.
And that 400 figure comes from what Rumi mentioned earlier. So this is on par with docking stations that come from the likes of Dells of the world. So that will be one of the messages, that this is this docking station with this extra utility on the same cost.
Thanks.
Hi guys, this is Ankush here. Thanks for the pitch. Forgive me if I missed this, but I've heard you guys talk quite a bit about demand generation. How are you guys thinking about the supply chain here? Because every small hardware manufacturer I know at the moment is really, really struggling. So how are you thinking about that in terms of meeting your launch timelines and making sure you've secured the right kind of components for your supply?
Yeah, sure. So interesting. The part that we need to think about and be concerned with most is what Jamie referred to as sexiness of the device. So that comes from the aluminum finishes and the outside of the hardware. We're also partnering up with Framework, a laptop manufacturer that has recently gained so much traction in the US. So in the box, we have these expansion card slots that are compatible with Framework laptops. So there's the aluminum shell that we've already secured the supply chain for the Kickstarter campaign for that through our connections here in Toronto. And we already are in talks with Raspberry Pi to supply the compute for modules. That is essentially what consists the supply of the PCB that goes inside in this first iteration.
And just to add one thing, that through time, as users adopt our ecosystem and like purchase boxes, we will like move away the main business from the hardware. Like we want to actually like have it outsourced. Like let's say they'll build like the core and other hardware developers just develop towers for it, because that wouldn't be our main source of revenue. So it's just like a starting point for us to just show this product to the market.
We are even internally calling it the form factor as opposed to like something that we are thinking about like as our own proprietary thing for the long term. But yeah, it's a form factor that is very similar to cases that we had like 15 years ago. Remember when we had these PCI cards slots? Just instead this time around, they are USB towers that go inside and give you that expansion and customization.
You know, the thing that would worry me, right, is that hardware is really hard, right? It's a completely different problem set and skill set to software, right? Is there any way you guys could actually not do the hardware yourselves even to begin with?
Well, I mean, we want to showcase that. So the idea is that people have personal servers, right? So there needs to be a hardware. So definitely after the Kickstarter, we will be looking into partnerships to, as you said, just not do it. It's like a bit like what, remember, Google did with the Nexus line. It would partner up with HP and those kinds of like companies who were deep in this and just set out the design agenda for the rest of the industry players to make it. So that would be the path. But for the Kickstarter campaign, we need to ship to a first initial customer base, and it's secured because we are like mitigating the risk by adopting Raspberry Pi to the max.
Yeah, fair enough. Thanks.
So just so I'm clear on all your different fundraising things, you have a Kickstarter, you have the token sale this month, right? For $1 million.
Yeah.
What else is on your what else needs to be funded and where the use of proceeds? Obviously the Kickstarter thing will just be for hardware, I'm presuming, but where are you raising? What are you raising? And in what forms is it coming in?
We are raising 1 million in November to support the software, like in a nutshell, support the whole software and board protocol.
Okay.
The Kickstarter is to fund the hardware side and actually also gaining our initial user base. And like as I said, we are working with GadgetFlow on that. So those are two initial funding goals. And then like through the next round of public token sale and token generation event, we are funding our actually blockchain side development. So there are like three aspects to it. One is the software, which is enabling users to use the box to connect to boxes. That is funded in November. Then there is the hardware that is funded through Kickstarter, and there is a blockchain aspect to it for the monetization layer, which will be funded through our public token sale.
Yeah, so Rumi, the Kickstarter campaign is not really funding, it's just covering expenses. And we might even have to spend some to cover all the costs. So it might not be like at all like to give us any margin.
Okay, it's more like marketing and awareness, right?
Exactly.
So going forward then, so hardware costs will be supported by what happens in the public sale? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, so longer term, we won't be selling the hardware at loss. So these two numbers, 100 and 400, came from our like customer service that we conducted. So these are the best entry price points, no matter what the bill of material would be at the end of the day for us. So we're trying to like ship at those prices, at least for the super early birds. So that's going to be finalized until February when we actually go live with it. But so it's the price that makes sense for the customers from the perspective that they're joining this effort.
Okay.
Could you show us the product quickly? Do you have a close up?
Sure. Give me a sec to share my screen and show you some of the cool.
Actually, I have it in the slides. I can share it.
Hasan, I have the close-ups like from the actuals. So if you allow
Okay.
me to share it. So what's my screen? One, screen two, screen one. Okay, sure. Right. So these are the final renders before production. So we've submitted these for manufacturer to make. So this is the $400 tower that will be shipped to the Kickstarter buyers. So it has this middle tower that we call hub, and that gives them the function of docking the station. So they plug in their laptop here and it gives them customizable extra ports. But this brother next here is the one that gives them blockchain attached storage. And it has 2 expansion cards that can be memories, right? So these could give them 2 terabytes of memory. And then in total, there are 7 more towers that can expand this offering, right? So this is the $400. This is another perk with an internal extra storage. This is the base. This is front view. This is exotic. This is how it's built. And this is the $99, so it's just the left brother.
Thanks. Where are the lights? I want to see the lights.
We often get asked
Right.
how big it is because sometimes people think it might be like server room size, but really it's smaller than a size of a normal piece of paper.
Yeah, it is about like this size. So it's like an A4. That's the height.
I was looking for like little Lego bumps on top of it so that I could keep on building my towers.
Right. That was one idea, right? That's later on, like people will come on with all sorts of innovative ideas in how to making these towers, like having towers that consist of floors and plug into each other.
Right.
So the only thing that we like to think that is a timeless design because it has these USB-C connections that even the USB-C part can be replaced by that other piece that I showed you. Let me show that to you again. The grid part, right? So we have this grid that gives us even makes us even not depend on the USBs necessary. So this grid, this can be Thunderbolt 3 this year, Thunderbolt 4 next year. So you just swap it and you are up to date. But then the innovation of what you can do with the towers, you can even have them in the shape of like an ice cube or some crystal or whatever. So we don't impose those restrictions. We hope that this will be like innovative in the hands of these Raspberry Pi hobbyists that already sell in the ecosystem. So they package and sell at Amazon, can build towers.
Nice.
All right. Any more questions from the audience? Comments, feedback?
I want to add something that like the hardware. So there are like, as I showed in the slides, there are other companies such as Umbrel or Avado who are looking into having P2P hardware basically sold to customers. The thing that differentiates us is actually our hardware is kind of form factor that Kevin mentioned. So we are not like Avado is selling a fixed hardware to the customers, and if developers want more like extra CPU, they need to force customers to purchase new hardware. Ours is a form factor, so users can customize, can upgrade themselves, can do like without imposing extra cost at them, and the monetization layer for the developer outside of the traditional ones.
Yeah, I mean, hardware was a side effect really to our mission. So it happened. It needs to exist because it realizes the vision. So what the line of thinking for us initially was how we get these open source developers that create all these kind of cool dev tools for developers. And there's this innovation on a monthly basis in the world of software development, and take that innovation into user-facing apps. How come like an app like Google Photos, it takes like 2 years for it to like show the simplest sign of improvement on the user experience side, right? Whereas in the development world, we are working with this front-end JavaScript this month, and it's a paradigm shift in the next month. And that was because we figured that the reason for that is that the open source app developers of the world, they need to pay for server costs. So to solve it from first principle, we need to solve for that. There shouldn't be a monthly AWS bill that they need to pay. So that's why the hardware exists, and that's what realizes that vision and mission.
All right. Any follow-up questions? Perfect. In that case, I'm going to stop the recording now.